everyone, I'm Megan. Welcome back to my homestead. Today we're going to do another garden tour. We're almost to the end of July and so much has changed since our last tour. We've got fruit setting on tomatoes and tomatillos as well as peppers, and we flipped some garden beds. So let's go take a look and see where we're at. I just wanted to show you my potting up station. I do still have a lot of plants that are in 4-inch pots. I started too many. So usually I have friends and family and some neighbors that come and purchase them. They help me offset my seed budget. And this year I just didn't have the same uptake that I've had in the past. I think a lot of COVID gardeners around here just aren't growing as much this year. Maybe decided to do other things because Nova Scotia's growing season was so awful last year. If you're a newbie gardener, it can certainly lead to making you feel like you have a black thumb. And while that's not the truth, I'm sure a lot of people feel that way after last year. So behind me here is my 20 by 20 garden. I have peppers, tomatoes, and tomatillos here. There's quite the variety, and let's go take a look and see what we have growing. I'm going to talk a lot more in depth today about the varieties because we can actually see them setting fruit and start to see some of the differences in the plants. So our first row here in our 20 by 20 bed has a row of peppers as well as Paul Robson tomatoes. Paul Robson is a really big beefsteak tomato. I find that it's really meaty and I use it for a lot of canning. But it's also Chris's favorite to have on hamburgers and sandwiches. It's got a really great flavor. It's not super sweet. It's got a deeper like tomato flavor. And yeah, it's one of our favorites. And we grow as much of it as we can every year. So these plants are looking really healthy. I've been on top of pruning, even though you can see, perhaps you can see that some have two main leaders or main stalks. I did have some that set suckers when I wasn't pruning as much, but I don't have any blight on these tomatoes. I've had really limited fungus issues this year, which is such a drastic change from what I had last year. It's really refreshing and kind of promising. I've got a lot of flowers and fruit setting, and I'm really excited for these. So this is one of my Paul Robsons, healthy, some fruit starting. You can see the flowers in there. See the little fruits. So it'll be a few weeks to a month before we have any fruit that is ripe from these, but that's just fine. It's nice to see that they're setting fruit and they're healthy. So a nice big row of that. It's about 20 to 25 feet. Then we have a good variety of peppers down here. This is one of my rows of hot peppers, and I have these Hungarian hot wax peppers. They're all doing really well. You can see all of the little fruit that it's setting. And I'll try to put up on the screen how many days to maturity these plants are. They seem to be one of mine that is most ahead, which is really surprising because hot peppers usually take quite a bit longer for days to maturity. I also have some cayenne peppers here. These ones aren't looking as good. I had some failures in this row. I think just for inconsistent watering and because we had some really heavy rains at the end of June, beginning of July. So I replaced them with some peppers that I still had in 4-inch pots. So they look to be a little bit further behind, but some of their buddies down this row are about the same size and are just starting to bud. The flowers haven't quite opened up on these, which is not surprising because, like I said, cayennes are a hot pepper that takes many more days to maturity. So this is our second row here in this 20 by 20 bed, and it looks like a jungle. This row is entirely cosmonaut. These are a determinate variety, and they set a globe-sized fruit that's also quite meaty. So I'm looking forward to getting those. They probably look the best that I've had these variety look in years. Last year my cosmonauts got a lot of blight, and I didn't have a very good harvest at all. We had some really significant growing issues in Nova Scotia last year. So it's so promising to see them look so great. Because they are a determinate variety, they tend to come ripe much more all at the same time, and I use a lot of these for canning. I do not grow any traditional Roma tomatoes or paste tomatoes. I've found that they don't do really well in my climate, or I've at least not found one that does really well here. So I've just skipped growing them entirely and focus on some of the heirlooms that have been developed for my area. So these, because they're a determinate tomato, you don't want to prune too much. I've pruned more in the past, but I've not gotten as much fruit as I would like. So this year I'm kind of letting them bush out a bit more, set more suckers, and they're setting a lot more fruit and flowers for me. So perhaps this is what I'll be doing in the future. Maybe next year I'll give them a bit more space, but we've got some fruit setting in here. Ooh. Here we go. You can see the little fruit. It's still a little bit behind. We do look like we have an emaciated blossom here. So that might not be the best fruit, but I like the experiment, so I'll let that go. Just a different angle here to show you how many flowers we have set on these plants. Hopefully you can see them. It's quite bright out here today, but this is the time that I have to film this, so we'll deal with the lighting that we've got. Alright, and this is our third row of tomatoes in this 20 by 20 bed. Probably doesn't look a whole lot different from the last jungle I showed you where the cosmonauts were. This row starts with another determinate variety, which is called Fundy. Fundy was developed in Kentville, Nova Scotia, and is really truly bred for, you know, the Nova Scotian environment. I've got a lot of fruit setting on these ones. They should be a nice red globe-sized tomato, and I'm really happy that I'm giving these another chance. Last year they didn't do well for me, but nothing did. So this was a variety that I thought I would try again. I've got just 10 feet of this Fundy variety, and then in the additional 10 feet I have a kind of mix of different tomatoes, so let's go take a look at some of those. Let's show you up close a few of the fruit here first. You can see this particular plant has a lot of flowers on it and some fruit setting already. So I'm really happy for this variety of Fundy tomatoes. And oh my goodness, are these guys ever putting on fruit? Can you see that? There's a little cluster there. They're starting to become a good size. This is one of my earlier varieties, so I'm not surprised to see that they've got some of the largest fruit already. Can't wait until they're ready. So once we pass our 10 feet mark in this bed, we switch and we have some Granny C. I believe this is Granny Chanterelle tomatoes. This is a new heirloom variety that I'm trying this year. They're supposed to be really productive, and I've got 5 of those set here together. They're doing well. I have pruned them a bit more, just trying to give them some airflow, because these are an indeterminate variety and they'll just continue to grow. Our next variety here doesn't look too different yet, but this is our Moon Glow. This is a variety I've grown in the past. It comes from Cochrane Family Farms. For us is where we get our seeds. And it's a nice yellow globe-sized tomato, and I believe these ones are indeterminate also. This particular one doesn't have any fruit set yet. This is one of my longer varieties, if I'm not mistaken, and I'll double check for you. So our next row is 20 feet of tomatillos. These are the Amarilla tomatillo variety that I've grown in the past. You can see that they've started to set lanterns down here, and the fruit will grow inside of that husk, and when that's ready, the husk will be full and split opened. It's not quite like a ground cherry that's going to fall off the plant. While they do sometimes, if it's especially windy, I usually snag them before they fall off. I make a lot of salsa verde, and I really enjoy them. Perhaps you can see all of the happy bees that are filtering around. They do need cross-pollination, so I'm always happy when I see so many pollinators in the garden cross-pollination has not been a challenge for me since the first year that I grew tomatillos when I had no fruit. I now grow varieties that have been developed for our local area from Annapolis seed. They're a shorter season variety tomatillo, and I grow a lot of them, so cross-pollination is not an issue. So our fifth and last row in this garden bed has another row of Paul Robson tomatoes and a smaller row of peppers. These peppers are some of my sweet variety. I have King of the North, Purple Marconi, and something else. Pimento peppers, which are my other sweet variety. Like I said, Paul Robsons are our favorite. They do get really large, really bushy, and I have struggled with blight because they're just so big. They do require a bit more airflow, so I like what I've done here with the row of peppers and tomatoes rather than the two offset rows of tomatoes. It's giving these better airflow and more space to grow. And these ones you can see are setting some fruit. I'm super excited for them, and I definitely can't wait for these ones to be ready. I should mention that these peppers, I did transplant most of them quite late. I actually finished them this week. A lot of people would be, oh my goodness, what are you doing? These plants are never going to have time to come to maturity, because generally you start counting your days to maturity when you transplant your plants. For me, some of these peppers, like my pimento peppers, are literally 55 days to maturity. So when I finished transplanting them this week, I was 56 days from my last anticipated frost. I'm not going to stress about these. I have more peppers planted than I anticipated, and if I get fruit, it's just going to be a bonus for me. I do anticipate getting fruit from these plants, and I'm also prepared with some frost cover to protect them from the frost if they're almost ready when we get our first frost. Here in Nova Scotia, we can have, 1 or 2 nights of frost, and then we don't have frost again for a month. So being able to protect my plants early in the fall is really just a benefit for us to extend our season. And when you have a 95-day season, it's exceptionally short, so anything that you can do to extend your season is just a bonus. It's so nice to see some native pollinators here at the tomatillos. That was a bumblebee you saw, and those are one of our native pollinators. So this is our other 20 by 20 bed, and I can't imagine that anybody would recognize this from our last video. In our last video, this is where my garlic was, and I chose to pull it a bit early this year. My garlic had some witch's broom, so it was setting multiple scapes per plant. It didn't appear to be overly healthy, and when I pulled some test garlics, I had cloves formed, but I was also seeing some wireworm damage, and to prevent further wireworm damage, I pulled it. I don't know if that's the best thing to have done. I'm still kind of new to garlic, and I'm not as educated about it as I might be tomatoes or peppers, and the pests that you can see above ground on those type of plants are much easier to identify and have a conversation with gardening groups in your local area or on Facebook. So hopefully I did the right thing. It is curing in the basement with some fans, which is how I normally do it, and it was really seemed like a bumper crop of garlic, so I trust that that will be just fine, and we'll get to preserving some of that, because with some wireworm damage, it may not, stay as healthy for as long. And we should talk. I did replace a lot of the garlic. I do have one bed here that has not yet been replaced, and I replaced it with something different than I told you I was going to. So when I pulled my garlic, I really discovered a lot more weed pressure than I was happy with to go ahead and direct seed the cucumbers that I had discussed seeding. So with having so many leftover peppers and tomatoes, I decided to do another succession, I guess, of those. We've got a good variety of both tomatoes and peppers, as well as my bed of jalapenos that was existing when I had the garlic. Let's go take a closer look. So this bed was my original bed of jalapenos. You can see some of the plants here are doing really, really well, and some of them are much smaller. That's because I had some really severe damage to some of my plants and they didn't make it. I think that it was either earwigs or ants. I know that earwigs can just kind of snip the little baby seedling off, and you won't typically find it. So that happened to some of my plants, and some of them were just a dead little stick. I didn't see any, significant aphid pressure on there, but they did just kind of shrivel up and die even with more consistent watering. So I could see that maybe they had dampening off during the thunderstorms that we had. We had some really significant rainfalls for a few days in a row. And I also did see a lot of ants and ant hills. So when I dug up to replant, I was unearthing ant hills, and I did give it some time and put some ant stakes in there to hopefully eliminate some of those ant populations. So we'll see. We've got some that are doing so much better. I do have some trays of more plants here because I do plan to plant more densely. Currently these plants are spaced on an offset of every 24 inches, so 2 feet, and I think I'm just going to plant them every 1 feet. My other peppers that I have spaced 12 inches or 1 foot are doing just fine. Peppers tend to like to hold hands and be nice and close together, so I think that would work best for me. So that will probably be transplanted. Jalapenos, these are an early jalapeno. I think they're like 75-ish days to maturity, so I might have to give them some frost protection. They're doing really well in their 4-inch pots. I've had some come to fruition in 4-inch pots, so we'll see. It's all just a big experiment at this point. Alright, so not the best lighting because of the shade trees over here, but perhaps I'll turn you around and see if it's any better. In this row we have a row of Paul Robson, majority of varieties of tomatoes, and then a good mix of peppers here on the right. I'll take you in for a closer up look. The second row over here is the same. And then the third row hasn't changed since our last tour. It does have my unstacked green stalks. I'm still waiting for that neighbor to come with his tractor to help us with a driveway and a front path and a few other things. Just general landscaping. We're going to add another garden also, but with weather, they got behind on a few other jobs, and I am not bumped up the list yet, so we're just waiting our turn. I'm sure he'll get up here as soon as he can, even though we're like well over a month behind. I'm not super stressed. It'll get done before the winter, and it'll be just fine. So 90% of these peppers, I cannot tell what was written on the plant tag, even though they almost all still have tags. I know some are Amish pimentos, and I do trust that some are purple Marconi, and perhaps King of the North bell peppers. I had used a smaller marker, a finer tip, to label these ones that had longer names, and they did not hold up in the sun. So I will use my regular old Sharpie next year, like I did for this jalapeno tag over here that you can still read just fine. So we won't make that mistake again next year, and we'll make sure to use tags that are legible. So a good mystery mix here. I do trust that most of these are sweet peppers. They are very different from, for example, my candlelight hot peppers, and I feel that these are sweet peppers, so we'll see what we get. So some of these varieties are labeled and are different. I have a Moon Glow here, and I know that I have a Cherry Falls down here at the end. Cherry Falls is a new variety for me again this year. I impulse bought some seeds at a feed store that I was at, in Truro, Nova Scotia, and they are due to be a tumbling variety. Honestly, this is a very upright plant for a tumbling variety, and so are all of the other ones that I have in my planters. They are setting fruit and doing well, but they were also my first variety to come down with blight this year. Both the ones that have been planted on their own and the ones that have been planted more densely in the planters like my green stalks. I've pruned them super heavily, and if those fruit get to maturity, that's going to be great, and if they don't, that's okay. My biggest priority at this point is controlling the blight the best that I can so that it doesn't spread to my other varieties that are still really healthy, like my Paul Robsons. Just wanted to give you a view of what the start of the blight looked like. I see that I need to come back and prune some of these leaves again. So this is my Cherry Falls plant. It's got some nice healthy buds on it, and even a little cherry tomato, but I do want to make sure to get that blight off so it doesn't spread. And like I said, it's okay if this plant doesn't make it. So from another angle in the same bed, you can see we have different peppers. I believe that these are an Amish pimento. They were in a 4-inch pot prior to being transplanted over the last 2 weeks. And this one already has flowers. So I trust that I'm going to get fruit on this. Like I said, they're 55 days to maturity. We're already fruiting or flowering, and we've got 56 days until our first anticipated frost. So I'm not too stressed about that at all. And switching over to our second bed, there. Switching over to our second bed, this is much more random varieties of tomatoes, I believe, but the majority are Sun Gold tomatoes. These are a really popular variety of cherry tomatoes, and I usually sell a lot of plants for cherry tomatoes for these. And this year I planted a whole extra seed packet and I didn't sell any. And that's totally okay. I've planted them in my garden. I know some of my neighbors really enjoy them, but also refuse to grow plants. So perhaps they'll be gifted some tomatoes. I also have another row of peppers here, as we talked about. These are ones that I suspect may be the candlelight hot peppers. They're much bushier. They are just starting to set a few flowers, and we'll see what we get. These ones also had the tags that are blank. And I do know that my candlelight hot peppers were one of those that I used that smaller marker on. I'm just leaving the tags in there to deter pests. You know, when the birds don't have things to snack on, or they hit those, they're less likely to eat my plants. So I will leave them there as a preventative. Some of them I can make out the first couple letters and determine what things are. Maybe I'll come back and relabel stuff, but I'm a pretty lazy gardener, so probably not. These guys look really, really behind. I don't have any trellising started, and to compare that this variety of tomatoes here, majority in this bed, is Paul Robsons that we saw in our first 20 by 20 garden beds that are already setting fruit and flowering, and you know, are 2 to 3 feet taller than these plants. They look pretty drastically different, but I know that now they're transplanted out, they're probably going to catch up just fine. This mess of my green stalk planters is still here, same spot. We're just going to leave them unstacked probably until our friend comes with a tractor. Maybe we'll put them somewhere different, but we really need them to be out of the way. He's going to be working on both our driveways, our front path, and putting some like fill dirt that he scraped off our driveways and such in kind of our wooded area behind our house. We have a lot of woods behind us that we own, so he's going to be driving through here with the tractor, so we really don't want to have any obstructions more than we need. So yeah, not quite sure where to put these guys in the meantime, so they're just here. they're still doing quite well. I do have cilantro that is going to seed. I've explained before that once they go to seed, it is just the coriander plant, and when those seeds turn brown, we can harvest them for coriander or for seeds to save for cilantro next year. You never have too many cilantro seeds. Also some savory and parsley, as well as some sage hiding in bit there in the back. We have an empty planter that had basil in it that failed. I just don't think it was getting enough sun when this was stacked. We have some thyme, some oregano. I cut a whole lot of these herbs this week to dry in the dehydrator for more seasoning salt and to use in some recipes. And they've just grown right back, you can't even tell. So I'm really enjoying growing these in the green stalks. These are the Leaf 7-tier planters, I'm sure you can tell. And we're really pleased with them. We'll definitely have these again in the future. These here are those Cherry Falls tomatoes that I told you about. These ones started with the blight first. You can see that I've really aggressively pruned them. I had not started to aggressively prune them because I expected them to tumble and get better airflow and kind of be away from each other. And because they are a hybrid variety, I expected them to have a bit more disease resistance also, and that was just not the case. So, lesson learned. We'll have to consider if this is a variety we're going to grow again in the future. But for the time being, there's some fruit setting, and hopefully that gives a chance to ripen before these plants succumb to blight or the patience of me pulling them out because I'm done with pruning them. This is our second stack of the green stalk planters, and I have some ever-bearing strawberries in here. You can see they're still setting some ripe fruit, and there are some flowers. They've really bushed out. They're setting a lot of runners that I'm going to need to contain here shortly. And yeah, we're happy with these. I love strawberries, so it's a big benefit for us to have an ever-bearing variety to get later into the season. Garden snack. Alright, so this is our big garden. This is our 50 by 25 foot garden. This is the original one that we put in, and some things have changed, but not a whole lot. So this bed is still TBD. You can see right now all that is growing is weeds. So I'm probably going to get some of my 4-foot fabric down here. I've thought about maybe putting garlic there later in the season because that's done well for me in that space prior. It's been, I believe, 3 years since I've had garlic in that space, and I don't recall having any significant pest issues there. So that might be a good rotation for our garlic this year, and we're still able to tarp the rest of the beds. Yeah, I did chaos seed dill here. I tried seeding peas and a few other things, and nothing has germinated. So I do really want to amend this soil, and I was hoping to get the garden soil from my landscaping projects delivered, and I don't have that as of yet. So I'm just kind of undecided what I'm going to do here. Might try to add some like granular fertilizer. I have done a soil test. I did one last fall, and everything came back fine. I did take like a sample from this entire 100 by 25, or pardon, 50 by 25 foot garden bed. But yeah, all the levels were really good, pretty normal. So I wasn't, particularly amending anything. We're just gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do with that space. If you have any suggestions, let me know. It's getting some really limited light, so I have thought about lettuce. I do a horrible job at growing lettuce for myself, so I don't know. Maybe we need to prune some trees. We kind of like the privacy of them. because the public community mailboxes are directly across the street from our front windows and the garden where I spend a lot of time. So it's kind of nice to have that barrier for a little bit of privacy at least. We'll see. So this row, next row is peppers. So this row is the first row that I planted out of peppers, and I think you can tell that maybe I stunted them. So this was the first thing that I transplanted. I had lost almost all of the plant tags for these peppers. So they were mystery peppers. I felt that they were mostly sweet peppers. I transplanted them. And I think that even though I transplanted them after our last frost, the soil temperatures were probably still a little too cool. I had hoped that my black landscape fabric would warm that up, and I think that I would benefit from getting a soil thermometer for next year so that I know what the temperature is when I'm starting to plant out things like peppers that need a warmer soil temp to thrive. Not too worried that these are stunted, because if they are in fact my sweet peppers, they are shorter season varieties and should still come to fruition. So this next row is literally 50 feet of tomatillos. So these Toma Verde tomatillos, this is my first year growing this, variety. They're from the same seed providers, the Annapolis Seeds. Super happy with them. You can see there's all kinds of flowers set. There's all kinds of lanterning happening. And hopefully we'll have some ripe fruit here in the next few weeks. Tomatillos are usually one of the first things that comes to fruition for me, and one of the last things that comes to, succumbs to the frost. They seem to be fairly frost hardy, even though they're such a warm climate crop typically. I've been really thankful that these have done so well for me here in Nova Scotia. I almost always have a bumper crop of tomatillos, and last year in 2023 this is pretty much the only thing that I had a decent crop of. Alright, so this is my 50-foot bed of tomatoes. I've got a good variety of tomatoes in this bed. I did some experimenting of how densely I was going to plant things. So you can see there is a single row, and then further down here there is about 20 feet of a double row of tomatoes. In the single row of tomatoes they're spaced 24 inches apart. Pretty standard for me. And in the double row, they are spaced 1 foot apart and are way too densely planted. So I have learned from my experiment, and I won't be planting as densely in the future. Still not struggling with a whole lot of blight because I've been really on top of pruning this year. But yeah, I've been pruning more heavily because the plants are planted so closely together, and they're just kind of growing in together. So not something that I'll do again in the future, at least not how I did it down there. I'll take you in for a closer look, and we'll go through a few of the varieties in this bed because they're different than what I have in the other large bed with tomatoes. So this plant here is a furwick tomato. Furwick is the German word for firework. They produce a really nice stripy tomato. They're set fruit really early this year, and they look great. They're setting a lot of flowers, and they look like they're going to be really prolific. Really pleased with them. They haven't had any blight issues, and I've got about 5 of them in a row here in this bed. So can't wait to see them ripe. Plants look a little stressy at this time, not too bad. It's the height of the afternoon and they're due for a water tonight, so not too surprising for them to look like that. I have a Goldie here. This is a large yellow beefsteak tomato. Yellow gold, as the name suggests. It's starting to flower in a few small places. It's a longer season variety, so I'm not surprised that it doesn't have too many flowers on it yet. Beside Goldie, you can tell this stem is a much darker color. This is because of the anthocyanins in the plant, because this is a black strawberry. It's going to produce a black fruit and then have some red striping when it becomes mature or ready. So you can see there's some suckers in there that I haven't pruned off yet, and I'm going to debate whether I need to remove those or not this year. This plant, with how it's growing right now, it looks great. This is a cherry tomato variety, so I tend to let them get a little bit bushier than I do my beefsteaks. A few Sun Gold cherry tomatoes here. They are doing really well. They're setting some good fruit. We've got some fruit clusters like we have over here. We have some good tomato clusters. They're well pruned, they're looking healthy, and like I said, they're delicious. They're super sweet, so great snacking tomato. These next few plants are Midnight Snack. So these are one of our favorite, well, probably our favorite cherry tomatoes. They start out this really deep purple color, and then they ripen to red on the bottom when they are ready. We've got some good fruit settings, some good flowers, and we're really hopeful for these. We forgot to buy seeds last year and didn't have any, so to have them again this year is super exciting. Can't wait till they're ready. These next two plants are our Tigerilla cherry tomatoes. These are going to be a nice stripy tomato. This is our first year trying this variety, so I'm excited for some fruit to be set and to get those. They seem to be right on track for their earlier days to maturity, and they're looking nice and healthy, so I'm quite excited to give these a shot. These are our last plants in our single row of tomatoes, and then we're moving along to those tomatoes that were planted much more densely. Same varieties on a repeat, because I really wanted to see the difference between the fruit and the healthiness of the plants by planting more densely versus less. And this is a good example of these two. You can see two separate stems on the tomatoes. They're touching. They've been pruned really aggressively. They are setting fruit, but they're just a little bit too close for my liking. I don't really want the plants to be touching, because if one gets sick, I don't want it to transmit to the other. So yeah, I did not plant these on an offset, and I only planted them, I think, 1 foot apart. And this is just much too dense even for these cherry tomato varieties. So I've learned my lesson. Next year they're going to have better spacing, and this year we're just going to stay on top of pruning so we can try to get some ripe fruit. And this is what the rest of that bed looks like. Just the same cherry tomato varieties on repeat. Do have some sweet peppers planted down at the end of this row also. They're actually looking pretty good. You can see that there's some missing. I've got some empty spaces because they did fail, just like in some of the other beds. I'm not too worried about it. I might put some more peppers in here. Haven't gotten around to that yet. You can see I've been doing some weeding. I got a new hula hoe or stirrup hoe. Really happy with it, but much like myself, I didn't quite finish the job, so I left the tools out. But these peppers are looking quite happy. They're setting some fruit, and yeah, it looks like we're gonna have a great harvest this year. So this is our 5th and last bed in the big garden. Some things haven't changed too much. I do still have peas, and I did harvest the majority of my shelling peas this week. I got 2 1/4 cups of shelled peas. Discovered the foster dog really likes peas fresh from the garden, so he helped me eat the pea shells, and I'll link a video of him. It was quite cute. But for now, we've left these in place. I'm going to start pulling some of the unhealthy ones that are dying back. Some are still setting a few flowers, so we'll let them continue to go. You can't see, but I've also direct seeded some cucumber seeds. I plan to use this trellis for the cucumbers. They've not yet sprouted, so still just giving the peas a little bit of time to see if we get any more ripe fruit maybe just some more treats or snacks for Sprocket. This next 10 feet is looking a lot different because I finally weeded it. And I decided what I wanted to plant here. So I did a really big weeding, and then I made some furrows, and I direct seeded a whole bunch of herbs. So I direct seeded parsley and cilantro and dill and thyme, knowing that some of these are going to come to fruition well before our first frost. Some of them are frost hardy, like our parsley and even a little bit our cilantro. And with some protection, those can actually last all winter. I didn't know if I wanted to do more herbs in this space, but I didn't really have any other plans. Hopefully these will germinate and I can control the weeds because I'm not yet ready to lay more weed fabric in this space. It's also nice to have a space that I can just direct seed straight into, where I don't need to start the seedlings in another space. So hopefully these will start popping up soon. I do still have my sage in here. Somehow there's a chard that is still hanging out. It's not doing super well, but it overwintered and it's still there. So we're just gonna let that see if it does anything. The next 10 feet in this garden bed is peppers. These peppers are probably doing the best. They're doing really, really well, setting a lot of flowers and even fruit. I'll take you through and show you some of the little baby peppers that are growing. I'm super excited. Some of these are labeled and some of them are not. It's just the reality of growing a garden. Yeah, things happen, labels get lost, marker wears off. I'll be able to tell what things are pretty soon. But for now, let's go through and take a closer look. I'm just so excited with how well these peppers are doing. They've grown leaps and bounds in the last 2 weeks, and yeah, it's so nice to see nice, healthy plants. So this one here, hiding under the leaves, is an Amish pimento pepper. This will be a small bell-type pepper. My estimation is that it will be about the size of a baseball. So we've got a few other flowers on this one, lots more buds set up top. Looks like a nice bushy little plant here, so bring on the peppers. These ones are about 55 days, so not surprised to be seeing this one set fruit first. Another Amish pimento fruit here, lots of flowers on this plant. Super pleased. Same with this one. I believe this is also a pimento. And we'll take you over for what I think is a jalapeno. I said that I think this is a jalapeno, but I actually think this is a purple Marconi pepper. It does take a longer form, and it will hopefully turn purple as it ripens. Surprised not to see more anthocyanins in this plant, but that's just fine. We'll see what happens. First year growing this variety, but I know I planted sweet peppers only in this bed because I have my roulette habanero, heatless habanero peppers in this bed, and I wanted to make sure if I was going to save seeds for next year, even if they're not completely true to type, that they wouldn't be cross-pollinated with a hot pepper variety. So I have 2 remaining of those roulette heatless habanero peppers here in this bed. I had planted 4, 2 failed, but these ones are looking really healthy, not yet setting any buds or flowers. I believe they were a longer day to maturity, so that's just fine. I do have 2 in a pot still also, and we'll check those out later in the tour. So this next 10 feet here was where we had previously had our leftover garlic. So when I pulled the rest of my garlic, I pulled this too. I found wireworms in this bed also. And I had a suggestion from my Canadian Garlic Growers Facebook group that growing mustard may eradicate some of those wireworms. So I bought some microgreen mustard seeds and I did 2 rows. They've germinated super, super densely. And in the middle, I've also direct seeded some zucchinis. I've got one that's sprouting down here. I'll get you a closer look. But this bed was a space that I knew I could direct seed in, hoping that the mustard would germinate really quickly, as it did, and outcompete some of the weeds. So those zucchini plants also get really, really big and will shade out some of the weeds, so I won't have significant weed pressure in this space. So hopefully the mustard also helps to get rid of those wire worms. I would like to plant out things like potatoes in the future and other root crops. And I know that the wire worms will eat those or damage those crops. So whatever I can do to try to get rid of that would be great. I will see if I can find any kind of scientific journals that say that mustard might help, or some of the resources that this Facebook group mentioned, because I like to back things up with science. I believe this is one of my zucchinis here. Hopefully that's what that is and not some more weeds, because I thought from the deck that this was a zucchini, but I think it's just a dandelion. I know that's where I put my seeds because I have a plant marker there, but I did direct seed some Bossa Nova zucchinis, as well as some sunburst squash. There's a summer squash that looks a lot like a patty pan. So they're both 57 days to maturity, and I think we should have some time for that, as long as they sprout soon. I'm sure a lot of people are going to say, oh my goodness, your soil looks so dry. I have a really heavy clay soil, so the water is held a lot under the surface. So I do tend to water each evening when I have seeds that I've direct sown, so that they don't have a heavy crust to break through. This is our blueberry row. We've got some weeds in here and some very happy blueberry plants. You can see I've covered some because we have a robin that was helping herself to our ripe fruit, and we would like to get some for us. So had a lot of troubles getting this cover to stay on. I don't have the best solution for something this tall. So in the future we might order something different, but for now we've protected our heaviest producing blueberry bushes, and the rest we're just trying to stay on top of harvesting. When you don't have, you know, a big abundant orchard, trying to protect even just a few of your blueberry bushes can make a big difference in your harvest. So you can see in this high bush variety we've got some nice ripe fruit, some that's coming along. The robin hasn't seemed to figure out how to get them from this high up yet, but we do have some low bush varieties, and she was really helping herself to those. More garden snacks, because why not? Hopefully you can see through the netting there, because I'm not moving it and putting it back again. But we've got some ripe blueberries. Hopefully Chris will get out and harvest these soon. These are really his plants, and if he doesn't harvest them, I will, and I'll make some more muffins. Flower beds are starting to look like flower beds. Our hops have kind of been decimated by a caterpillar, so you'll see they're not as bushy or leafy up at the top here as they are at the bottom. We think that we have a question mark butterfly larva that's been eating our hops. Hops are one of their plants that they do eat, that they lay eggs on and reproduce on. We're trying to find a balance between letting them be here because they are native, and getting some harvest off hops for ourselves. Some flowers that actually look like flowers right now. We've got some hydrangeas that are looking nice and pretty, and that weedy mess below them is our remaining strawberries. They're really doing a lot to set new runners and take over that space. These are those roulette tomatoes that I said were in pots. We've just kind of shifted them into this flower bed because they fit. They have needed a lot of watering, but we're not doing fantastic. This is really how the other ones looked too, until they just kind of took off and set a whole bunch of new growth. so hopefully they'll catch up also. Those hops, this one is looking a lot healthier. I have picked off some of those younger caterpillars just by hand and moved them to an elm tree, which is one of their other crops that they can survive on. Hydrangeas are starting to look great. Hopefully they hold on and are pretty for a month or two. More strawberries. Coming down here you can see our chives that have gone for seed. That's just fine. And some more of our Cherry Falls tomato plants. These ones have also pruned super heavily because of blight. Doesn't seem to matter where they've been in the garden, how well spaced they've been, blight has been an issue for them. So like I said, not entirely sure if that's what we're going to grow again next year. Next to that we've got some sedum, which is a flower. These will get nice and pink closer to the fall. And we have a hosta. The hosta flowers are out and the bees and hummingbirds are really happy with them. I don't love this space for the hosta because it is in full direct sun, so the plant doesn't always look super healthy, but when you get so many bumblebees that are happy, like this guy that's just gone in that little flower, I can't be super upset. Alright, before the camera overheats again, we're going to go really quick. We've got some more sedum, hydrangea. And that camera most certainly did overheat again, but I wanted to say thank you for joining me for my garden tour. I'll have lots more content coming up here soon. I can't wait until I can show some canning content, as well as that's one of my favorite things to do to preserve my garden harvest, and why I grow so many nightshades, tomatoes, tomatillos, peppers, for salsa especially. I'll catch you guys in the next video. If you like this content, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel. Have a great day.